Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jim Knotts, and I'm President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here today to our Memorial Day ceremony at the Wall. This is the day that we honor and remember those veterans we have lost who were serving our country. Before I begin, I'd like to recognize some of our guests here today. First, to all of our Vietnam veterans, welcome home. Welcome home to this place that our nation has set aside for our Vietnam veterans, and it's a pleasure to always have you here with us. Welcome to all of our Gold Star family members and to all of those who are watching online. And I'd also like to welcome all of the folks in town for Rolling to Remember, here to bring awareness and accountability for POWs and MIAs. I would also like to thank Alan and Lisa Buckaloo for underwriting all of our 40th anniversary events that we're celebrating this year. And now to begin our ceremony, I'd like to introduce our chaplain to provide today's invocation. Please welcome Major Justin Finger.
Not too long ago, I invite you to stand up. Let that breeze hit you a little bit. Not too long ago, we brought a group of soldiers to welcome those coming into our national capital region on the honor flight. A Vietnam veteran looked at me and he said, "We could have used this 50 years ago," not knowing what to say. I said, "I'm sorry." That's why we're here now. Today we connect with the grief. We connect with the loss. Today we enter into this day of memory and memorial. We show up in the here and now, sharing stories, bringing comfort, bearing the light in the darkness of grief. That God remind us of our ability to bring hope. Remind us that these names on the walls, these soldiers, are never far from us because we carry them in our heart. And it beats every single day for them. That they are woven into the fabric of our nation, into the very being of our lives. Today we show up for them, we show up for each other. That God give us courage and hope, living a life worthy of their sacrifice. Today, we show up. Amen.
Thank you, Major Finger. Please remain standing, if you would, for the Joint Armed Services Color Guard from the Military District of Washington for the presentation of the colors. Color Guard, present the colors. Now, please welcome Sergeant First Class Lindsay Grubeldinger to sing our national anthem, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Rick Weideman, Executive Director Emeritus of Vietnam Veterans of America.
Color, preset, on. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose bright broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. O'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. For say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
If you join me, please, and salute the flag or hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Color, right shoulder on. Colors turn, march.
Please be seated. This month marked the 47th year since the last American casualties in the Vietnam War. Yet for some families, those years didn't bring closure as they waited for their family or friends. I call your attention to our empty chair here as a symbol of the 1,584 Americans who still remain missing or unaccounted for from the Vietnam War. Yet in remembering them, we must all recognize that we shall not rest until there is the fullest possible accounting of those who remain missing from the Vietnam War. We've made it our tradition that during our Memorial Day ceremony, we read any names the Pentagon has approved to be added to the memorial and the names of the missing who were repatriated the year prior. As you're able, please stand one more time. There were no names added to the memorial this year. I will now read the name of the one service member that was repatriated in 2021. Paul C. Charvet, Lieutenant Commander, United States Navy. Welcome home. Please be seated. If we could please have a moment of silence for all of our Vietnam veterans we've lost this year. And now I'd like to introduce our Master of Ceremonies. Alan Buckaloo is the chairman of the board of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. He is a decorated Vietnam veteran, a member of the somewhat famous Fox Force Recon Unit. He went on to a successful career in business, serving as the CEO of Princess Cruises and retiring as the Chief Operations Officer at Carnival Corporation. Please welcome our Master of Ceremonies, Alan Buckaloo.
Thank you, Jim. If I can read this. It's an honor to be here with all of you today. This year marks the 40th anniversary of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, the culmination of our 40th anniversary activities, will be our traditional in-person reading of the names in November. In this spot, we'll gather for 65 hours and read each of the 58,281 names on the wall. This is the seventh time that we've done this in the last 40 years, and we can't do it without the help of a lot of volunteers. Registration is now open to sign up to read specific names or at a specific time between November 7th and November 10th. I invite you to go to VVMF's website and sign up to read names in November. Now I'd like to tell you about something new and exciting that VVMF launched on Veterans Day. As we reflect on the past 40 years with the memorial and its remembrance, its outreach and education activities, we're also looking forward for the next 40 years. That's why VVMF launched the Legacy Endowment. As Vietnam veterans, we want to know that our service and our sacrifice for our country will be always remembered. We want to know that our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren will be able to stand in this spot that is so special to us long after we're all gone. The best way to make sure these activities continue is to establish a legacy endowment. And I'm excited to say that an anonymous donor has come forward with a $500,000 match. At the end of your printed program, yes, absolutely, thank you. At the end of your printed program, you'll find more information, and you can go to the VVMF website to gather even more insight. This is really about the future, and I challenge each and every one of you who values this memorial to participate in whichever way you can. Now on to our speakers. Each year, VVMF holds this ceremony in partnership with the National Park Service. So I'd like to welcome Jeff Reinbold, Superintendent of the National Mall and Memorial Parks.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the National Park Service, it is my pleasure to welcome our veterans, their families, honored guests, and the public to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, again, in person. We gather again on this Memorial Day to remember those whose names are on the wall and the generations they represent. Special welcome to Jan Scruggs. It's a privilege and an honor to have you with us again and to work in partnership with you and with Jim Knotts, the wonderful staff of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund at this hallowed place. I also want to recognize our volunteers, National Park Service staff, who interpret and maintain this magnificent memorial and educate the more than 4 million people who come here, more than 5.5 million people that come here every year, as well as those we reach virtually. A special thank you to the Volunteer Corps, many of whom have been personally touched by the war in some way. You know them by their yellow ball caps, by their warm smiles, offering a sympathetic ear when necessary, and always as a source of information about the wall, about the war, about the memorial, and the men and women it represents. 40 years ago, architect Maya Lin, her vision for this memorial was to create a park within a park, not an unchanging monument, but a moving composition to be understood as we move in and out of it. A serene place, a memorial for those who have died and for us to remember them. It is that and more. That idea of a memorial as a moving composition also exists through time. Maya Lin cited the memorial so its legs extend towards the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial to bring the Vietnam Memorial into historical context. This Memorial Day, we also mark the 100th anniversary of the dedication of the Lincoln Memorial, the president who dealt with military loss more than any of our other nation's leaders. When you go to the Lincoln Memorial, you will see the president's second inaugural address on the north wall, to the right as you enter. Widely considered one of the most significant presidential speeches in American history, the president rises above the divisiveness of the Civil War to bring closure and to start healing. You'll notice here at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, Maya Lin organized the names so they would meet in the middle. The war's beginning, the war's end. Completing the war so that the healing could begin. History doesn't always repeat, but sometimes it rhymes. Engraved on the south wall of the Lincoln Memorial is the Gettysburg Address. The President delivered it at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery in Gettysburg in an attempt to find meaning in a conflict that ultimately cost more than 630,000 American lives. Lincoln said that from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. Lincoln was speaking not just of the Civil War or those who died at Gettysburg. He was prompting all of us to remember all of those who have died in service to their country. National memorials like the Vietnam Veterans Memorial and the Lincoln Memorial provide us focal points where we can remember their sacrifices and their cause every day of the year, not just on Memorial Day. But on this Memorial Day, thank you for joining us here on the National Mall, where your nation honors and remembers those who have died for our country, and for heeding President Lincoln's words that these dead shall not have died in vain. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Reinbold. It's now my pleasure to introduce Jane McCarthy, who will speak on behalf of the the Vietnam Women's Memorial. Jane served as an Army nurse at Walter Reed Army Hospital before reporting to duty at the 95th Evacuation Hospital in Da Nang. She served in Vietnam in 1970 and 1971, working in the pre-op and receiving area, caring for the wounded. She was the first female commissioner to serve the Montgomery County, Maryland Veterans Commission, and she continues to serve veterans today. Please welcome Jane McCarthy. You wore the right outfit. I wish I was in fatigues.
I know. Okay. Peter Kogel, KIA, February 1967. Craig Simeone, KIA, May 1969. Eddie Marie, KIA, July 1969. Alan Keating, KIA, October 1969. Dennis Reardon, KIA, November 1969. These are names on the wall. Friends of mine that were born in Cohasset, and I grew up with them in a small town of Cohasset, Massachusetts. 8 boys in all we lost in Cohasset. This is why we have Memorial Day. This is why I march each year in the Cohasset, Massachusetts Memorial Day Parade. We are here now once again, here more than 50 years later, to remember this loss, to remember the high costs of war. Many of you out there served in Vietnam, nurses, like my friend Kathy Price out there, and others, nurses and corpsmen and medics that served in the hospitals and in the field. Helicopter pilots. I never knew any helicopter pilots because their job ended when my job began. And the radio men like Dick Churchill from Cohasset, who would radio in for the wounded, to bring on those choppers, to pick up the wounded and bring them to me in the hospital. So I'd like to ask all of you out there to please stand and let's give them a hand for all they did in Vietnam. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. And Gold Star mothers like Joanne Churchill from Cohasset also. Your sons were not alone. We took care of them. We were there to take care of them, all you Gold Star mothers. And you wounded vets out there who made it back, these nurses and doctors and corpsmen and medics are the ones that were there that took care of you. For as you heard, I served in Vietnam, in Da Nang at the 95th Evac Hospital in 1970 and 71, just after my friends from Cohasset had died. I was not in favor of the war and did not understand what we were doing there. But I knew many of my friends were being drafted. In those days, you were all being drafted, and you were wounded and killed. I decided what would be of more purpose at that time in my life, a new 21-year-old nurse, than to care for those wounded that were being drafted and sent to war. I joined the Army Nurse Corps, and after 10 months working here at Walter Reed, I was ordered to the 95th Evac Hospital in Da Nang, where I worked in what we call in the States here the emergency room. I worked in triage, which there it was called pre-op and receiving, meaning receiving the wounded. I took care of 18 and 19-year-olds. I rarely saw a 20-year-old that were shot up, frightened, alone, and afraid to die in a war that they did not understand either. How does a 22-year-old girl from a small town in Massachusetts tell a 19-year-old soldier that he doesn't have a leg or a foot anymore? And the head wounds, the patients that were expected to die, they were not candidates for surgery. I just held them. I held their hand until they died. I wondered why we were fighting this war. I thought I would find some answers in Vietnam, but I didn't. I did learn that war causes death and mutilation. So what was it like coming home for me? Looking back now, I had classic PTSD, post-traumatic stress. I believe all of us returning from war have some degree of post-traumatic stress disorder. I had nightmares, trouble sleeping, hypervigilance, I was depressed, I wasn't eating. In those days, though, there was no such thing as PTSD. You were told to just put one foot in front of the other, to go on with your life. That's what the healthy people did. So for me, that meant school, it meant work, it meant more school and family. But I did get some help along the way for my PTSD. In 1993, we had the dedication of the memorial for the nurses over there. I remember being here. We had a parade of nurses down Constitution Avenue. And each hospital had a banner with the nurses from that hospital in front of it. And it was a quiet parade. There wasn't a lot of cheering. And the vets were alongside of the road. And every once in a while, I'd hear someone yell out, "You took care of me. You took care of me." This was so healing for all of us, for the vets and for us, the nurses. It was a time for us nurses to begin to realize that we needed to heal too. We saw those atrocities day in and day out, and we needed to be healed. And that's what both of these Vietnam memorials have given to us over these years. And I'm so glad for what we do each Memorial Day. Our candlelight service in the evening over at the Nurses Memorial, the storytelling in the morning, and then this Vietnam program here in the afternoon, remembering the high costs of war. I would like to end today by sharing with you a poem written anonymously by a soldier that must have been wounded in Vietnam. It's called Angels in War. Listen now, I've a story to tell about some women who lived through hell. They fought in the war a special way sometimes 16 hours a day. Theirs is a story of pain and strife, and of one's agony and fight for life. Listen now to this story I tell about these women who lived through hell, for they were young, like you and me. How much more special can they be? How many hands at night did she hold? While a young voice cried out, "I'm so cold." Listen now to the stories they tell. These are the women who lived through hell. Let us not forget these stories they tell, for they were our sisters who lived through hell.
Thank you, Jane. It's now my pleasure to introduce a man who needs no introduction to most of you. Without the vision of one individual and a few of his friends, we would not be here today before this glorious memorial. One individual, Jan Schruggs, the Vietnam veteran who had the vision and passion to build an organization, VVMF, and lead the charge to create a memorial to all those who gave their lives in Vietnam. He wasn't alone in this endeavor, but he was its leader. There really are no words to thank Jan for his contribution to all Vietnam veterans and their families that are so worthy of all his efforts and those who worked with him. But I can and will ask that you stand and join me in welcoming to the podium this great American, this great patriot, and fellow Vietnam veteran, Jan Scruggs.
All right. I'm going to ask my friend Ron Gibbs to hand me something that I handed you that, you know, there's no sociological or anthropological precedent for the idea of people leaving things at memorials. It certainly happens in Asia, where small little altars are and people will put money and change in there for the Buddhist religion. But there's no really precedent for this type of behavior. So just kind of walking around the wall that was, I sort of found this. It's just kind of hilarious. It says, from Joda, it says, "Thank you for driving your motorcycles all the way to Washington, D.C. and remembering the people who fought in these wars. I'm going to pray for you guys to make it back to your destination. Thanks a lot, Joda." So this is the kind of thing that people leave at the wall. It's a very beautiful, a beautiful thing for people to do. So, but let's begin for each of you to thank you for coming here, because you may not have noticed it, but it's a little challenged. It's hot, the weather's awful, and that's why I give a quick speech, and that's going to be appreciated. Look, we're meeting at this memorial, we are meeting at this piece of land for a very important reason. You know, the reason is a fellow who had 1 year of actual education. His name was Abraham Lincoln. I want to bring to your attention, he was elected with less than 40% of the popular vote, and as he prepared to speak from the east front of the Capitol, 7 southern states had already seceded from the Union. War was coming, and as the crowd began arriving, sharpshooters from the U.S. Army, the snipers, were placed all along Pennsylvania Avenue. Very fascinating, and along the tops of the buildings. So what would Lincoln say this day to this deeply divided nation? He knew war was coming. He was trying to talk people out of it. We were very divided in 1861, okay? And in 1968, we were very divided as well. In profound ways. So this American, President Lincoln, looks down from his chair over there in perpetuity over this country we have that is perpetually sort of at having major disagreements with one another. But you know what? I think that's okay. You know, people should disagree. And we live in a country, we have a democracy. We can criticize the government or praise the government, anything we want to do. This is why we're Americans. And this is why I'm very proud to live here. This is what he wrote to try to talk people out of this war. We are not enemies. We are friends. We must not become enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and every patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone, all over this broad land, yet you swell the chorus of the Union, when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. Very dramatic words, better angels of our nature. Because when we have political discourse, we need to put aside the rancor and distrust and name-calling in political discourse. As you may know, at age 18, I joined the Army, which made perfect sense for a kid from Bowie, Maryland, a little town not far from here, and who had no skills other than being able to change oil on cars, and I was very good at pumping gas as well. That was the extent of my skill set, so why not go in the Army? Why didn't I go to college? I never considered going to college because it was impossible. How was I going to go to college? So it turned out that my entire life has gone around my 1 year in Vietnam, most of which was spent being halfway bored to death, but I put Americans in body bags with pieces of Americans in body bags and arms and legs and everything. And I saw some great people. I had some wonderful, wonderful friends over there. But upon my arrival home, I immediately began to lead a steady trajectory going downhill. I had a lot of fun on that motorcycle, did a lot of things I shouldn't do, but finally I got married to a wonderful woman. Becky Fishman was her name, from Silver Spring, Maryland. She's watching today. And at American University, I found a great curiosity about the effect of trauma, psychological trauma, on the human mind. You know, as our nurse friend from the beautiful state of Massachusetts explained, you don't just get over this because it's time for the next shift. It kind of sticks with you. So in 1977, I did some independent research that found that this was indeed true. The more combat people saw, the more likely they were to need psychological help. They had PTSD. So with the help of many other people, and we got the Congress to put together the Vet Center program, which continues to exist. So my wife and I go to see this movie called Deer Hunter, kind of a goofy movie, but there was a certain flavor to it. You know, when you go to war, it's a little bit like playing Russian roulette, and the whole movie kind of revolved around these guys playing Russian roulette. So, I said to my wife in the morning, I'm going to build a national memorial. I've made my mind up. This is what I need to do. I'm going to build a national memorial in Washington, D.C. She thought that's the craziest thing she's ever said, and that she had ever heard. And, you know, she was right, because I actually announced the memorial idea May 28th of 1979, 10 years after I was wounded in Vietnam. And it was quite an adventure. But what I needed was I was never going to get built. I needed a team. I got a team thanks to a guy named John P. Wheeler III. He's a graduate of West Point, a graduate of the Harvard Business School, and a graduate of, I think, Yale University, Yale Law School. Brilliant guy, did some really great things for his country. And he and I put together this team of really brilliant people who did good work, a good lobbyist in Washington, Ron Gibbs, and everybody was volunteering their time. And we persuaded the House and Senate to allow the memorial on this side of land. And again, what makes this side of land draw people to send things like this and to write poems to Agent Orange? This is really a special, sacred place for our country. And we had so many nice people help us get this thing through, including my good friend Max Cleland. Has anyone ever met or heard of Max Cleland out there? Yes, he was a U.S. Senator from Georgia. He was a director of the Veterans Administration. Great guy. He and I talk with some frequency, and just sort of a red, white, and blue patriot. In 1981, we had the largest design competition held in history of the United States or Western civilization. As a result of the entire event, this design was selected. But there were people who felt that this design was not only appropriate, it had to be stopped. One syndicated columnist accused us of possibly having a member of the American Communist Party on the jury. I mean, this thing had gotten way out of control, and we did everything, and we thought we had won. We went to get the construction permit, and the official at the Interior Department said, no, no, no. Secretary of the Interior has received over 24 calls from congressmen, and they're not happy. So you don't get your construction permit, and you don't get your memorial. These guys were trying to stop the memorial from getting built, take it over, and put something, different. Anyway, it became very popular, and everything turned out well. And history was made because we had an Army captain, a West Point graduate, coincidentally. His name is Tom Shull. He went to see the #2 guy at the Interior Department in 1979. He said, actually, you're going to give us that construction permit right now, because I am telling you on behalf of the White House and the President that we want this done. Well, he may be exaggerating a little bit, but indeed, we got the construction permit, and on March 26, 1982, we broke ground from this. We had 2 Vietnam veterans from every state, and it was a very, very nice event. And November 1982, the memorial was ready for dedication. We had a massive parade, a 5-day salute to Vietnam veterans, and the controversy over the memorial was all over. It was all over then. Everybody liked it, or at least tolerated it. But that's when, within days, people began leaving emotionally charged items there, a pair of cowboy boots, things that belonged to servicemen who died. And the veterans were welcomed home. This parade was incredible. Now millions and millions of people leave things here, visit, leave letters to the fallen, they leave memories, they leave salutes, they leave a part of themselves. Here's a couple of words from a young kid he wrote to Robert Aguilar, who was on 18 East, killed in action. He says, "Dear Robert, my name is Jackson Lewis Fox. I'm sorry the enemy shot you. If I was there, I would have taken a bullet for you." Very dramatic. Such a wild, beautiful thing to say. And may God watch over you. So as I end my speech, so in 1861, while the president could not stop the Civil War from occurring, he finally did that. And at Gettysburg, he said, as was noted earlier, "We here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, and that this government by the people, for the people, and from the people shall not perish from the earth." Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Yeah. You want your glasses? John. Yeah. Thank you, Jan. It's now my pleasure to introduce the first of today's keynote speakers, Colonel Ed Hubbard. Ed served on active duty in the Air Force for 28 years, of which 25%, 6 years, 7 months, and 12 days, were spent as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. Following his release in 1973, Ed completed 5 college degrees in 7 years. He started doing motivational speaking in 1985 to share the lessons he learned during his captivity. His book, Escape from the Box, The Wonder of Human Potential, was published in 1994. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Colonel Ed Hubbard.
How y'all doing today? Is it warm enough for you? Well, it's an honor and a privilege to be invited to speak here to commemorate all the people whose names are on the wall, but more importantly for me, two names that are on the wall. A young man named Greg Nobert was a member of the crew that I was flying with the day I was shot down, and Greg lost his life that day. Another name on the wall is Earl Glenn Cobiel. And I lived with Earl Glenn Cobiel for 18 months in prison. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about him later. He died in captivity in November of 1972 before release. And so these names mean a lot to me. They were very personal, people I knew very well. But what I would like to suggest to you today is that coming out on Memorial Day or Veterans Day or any other of our national holidays to memorize the names or learn the names of all these people and commemorate them is not enough. We really have to do this every day. It's far more important to do every day to remember what these people have done for us. And so I have a kind of a philosophy I developed over the years. I'm going to tell you very quickly how this philosophy evolved. First thing I want you to understand is I read a book not too many years ago by a guy named Viktor Frankl, who was a captive in Auschwitz for 3 years. And in his book, he talks about, he said, in the concentration camp, every circumstance conspires to make the prisoner lose his hold. All that remains is the last of human freedoms, the ability to choose one's attitude in a given set of circumstances. And Viktor Frankl's basic premise is very simple. He says, if you have no purpose in your life, you have no life. And so I told you about my purpose, what I came to believe based on a variety of interesting experiences. Back when I was 21 years old, I was invited to join the United States Junior Chamber of Commerce, the JCs, and they had a creed, and to become a member of the JCs, you had to stand up and recite the creed. There are 12 chapters in the creed. I can't remember any of them except the last one. The last one says, service to humanity is the greatest work of life. And I took that very serious, and it changed the way I looked at the world. And I thought that I understood compassion and what you could do for other people. 9 years later to the day, on my birthday, my 30th birthday, I was in a prison camp in North Vietnam, and the guards opened the door, and they threw this American on the floor, and he said, he's one of yours. You take care of him. And this was Earl Glenn Cobiel. And he had been beaten so severely for so long, he had lost touch with reality. And he wouldn't eat, he wouldn't drink, he wouldn't talk to us, he wouldn't do much of anything. After a couple of days, it became apparent, if we didn't do something right now, this guy's going to die in captivity. And so we developed a system. There were 8 of us in the cell besides him. 4 of us took turns. In the noon, we fed him the first meal of the day. In the afternoon, we fed him the second meal of the day. And we had no way to understand how to do this. We had no physical equipment to work with or anything, and so we developed a method where it took 4 of us to hold him down, open his mouth, and stuff food down his throat. We force-fed him twice a day. It took an hour and a half to feed him a bowl of rice, and we did that for a year. And then he got better. And once he got better, unfortunately, the Vietnamese moved him into another cell by himself, and he died in captivity. But we made that effort. But I learned that day what compassion really is. In the spring of 1968, I had a broken jaw from a disagreement with a guard. I had weighed less than 100 pounds. I had 200 boils all over my body, and I honestly thought, this is when I'm going to die. And the only reason I didn't die is because I suddenly found, just like you did, Jane, something more important that had to be done. We had a guy who was seriously dying. And so when I learned from that, and when I came home, I decided I wouldn't waste my life being angry about the war. I would go out and try to do something. I travel and speak a great deal, and I'm trying to find ways to improve the quality of life of somebody every day. And I'm trying to change society into a crowd that gets up early in the morning, wildly excited about getting up and going out, because you have an opportunity today to improve the quality of life of some other person. And if you do that, I guarantee you will come home at night, you will sleep like a baby, because you know you made a difference. And I think that's the most important thing that I learned from my captivity experience, how to deal with the world when it's not the way you want it to be. Your responsibility is to make it better. Several years ago, I had a rare opportunity. I was invited to speak for a company, and they wanted me to do a public service thing in every town where they had an office. As it turned out, they had 10,000 offices. And so I was slightly overcommitted, and I was concerned about how I was going to make this commitment come real. One day I was at my mother's house, and I took her to church, and her minister gave me a little note, just a little piece of paper. He says, here's a quote for you. He says, maybe you can find a use for this. And when I looked at what was on the paper, it suddenly, like everybody turned on a spotlight in the world, I suddenly knew what I had to do. On that little piece of paper, it said, the only true monument to mankind is the mark you leave on the life of another person. And so if every one of us go out every day and make a mark on the life of another, build another monument, we would not just pay respect to these people, we would carry on their legacy and what they contributed to our lives. And I think that's the most important thing that we can carry away today. It's important that we all become players of this. People ask all the time, how did you survive in those circumstances for so many years? Well, it's very simple. We had one event each week. Every single American in North Vietnam participated. It was our church service on Sunday morning. You heard this. That was a signal. That means that's a capital C in our tap code. It talks for church. It says time for church. It made a difference what religion you were, if you had any. That was the one time each week, every single American in North Vietnam paddling the boat exactly the same direction. We're all pulling together. It's not just about religion, it's about teamwork. It's about being a member of society that's working to get something done. And so that's where we come from. And our church service is very, very simple. We started out just like you did here today, pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, something we did with greater sincerity than anything you've ever done. That was followed by the 23rd Psalm. Look, I've been written for us. One of the lines says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. The most important lesson we learned in prison, fear is nothing more than a feeling comes over you when you lack confidence in your ability to cope with life as it's been dealt to you. But once you step up and accept full responsibility for your life and for your future, everything gets a lot easier. The line says, thou preparest a table before me, the presence of mine enemies. My cup runneth over. The most ironic situation I'll ever be in my life, locked up 10,000 miles from home in a crummy communist prison all by myself, giving thanks for my good fortune. Because you see, those of us in the prison behind the bars, we were the free people in that prison. The guys in the ice had the guns and the keys. They're still there. They're in prison for life because their minds are captured. Ours are free. We always ended our church service in captivity by singing God Bless America. We sang it very quietly. One of the greatest emotional events of my life was in 1973, up the road here, the White House. Richard Nixon had all of us in with our spouses and our friends to go to dinner at the White House. And late in the evening, as the things were kind of turning down, there was this little bitty guy who couldn't see over this podium. He had to stand on a box. And he stood up and he said, how about join me singing my song? And the little man at the podium was Irving Berlin, who wrote God Bless America. So today I would like to encourage you to join what I'm trying to do by standing and join me singing God Bless America. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the ocean white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Colonel Hubbard. It's now my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Chuck Hagel. Chuck was the 24th Secretary of Defense. He's the only Vietnam veteran and the first enlisted combat veteran to serve as Secretary of Defense. He received 2 Purple Hearts while in Vietnam and served as an infantry squad leader in 1967 and 1968. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Secretary Chuck Hagel.
Al, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Al, thank you, and good afternoon. First, I want to acknowledge Jan Scruggs, who you have just heard from. But I want to particularly acknowledge him for not just who he is and what he's done, but more importantly, what this wall represents. I want to also thank Jane and Ed for very heartfelt, sincere messages that are so important. Important at any time in our history, but I think more important today with a divided, polarized country that Jan referenced. Jan mentioned Max Cleland. Many of you know Max Cleland. He was the administrator of the Veterans Administration under Jimmy Carter. He started the vet centers. He started the first focus on Agent Orange epidemiological blood surveys. But more than that, and more than all the offices he held during his lifetime, including the United States Senate, he was a tremendous person. He had lost both legs in Vietnam and one arm. And some of the comments that Ed made and Jane fit Max Cleland. I was in Atlanta Tuesday for Max Cleland's memorial service. I gave a eulogy. And one of the points I made in that eulogy was what his life represented and what he did very much parallels what this wall is about. Max was a uniter. He brought people together, even though we all have differences. That's a democracy, as Jan noted. That's representative government. But tolerance is also part of that, and respect for all individuals, no matter what their belief, their color, their religion. That's who America is. That's who Max was. That's what this wall represents as much as anything else. 40 years ago, it united a lot of people. It brought Vietnam veterans together, their families. They're in and out of here each year. As Jeff noted, 5.5 million people visit this memorial. At a time in our nation and in the world where things seem upside down, where sometimes we wonder, is there any purpose behind all of this? And I think the world today is as volatile, unsettled, unpredictable, uncertain, as we've probably seen in our lifetimes. 68 was a tough year in this country. We had assassinations of Kennedy and King. That year, 1968, 16,000 dead GIs were sent home. On this wall, if you look at 1968, 16,000. Today, America would never allow that. Cities burnt in 1968, terrible racial divides, and they were in Vietnam as well in 1968. But somehow, we got through it, and somehow this country always self-corrects. We're a unique country. I don't know if we're God's chosen few, but I'm in no hurry to find out. But we have things that no other country has, capacities, capabilities, people, starting with how we were formed. No other country in the world was formed like this. So we do have tolerance. We do have all the right qualities that make human beings not necessarily great, but just good people who care about others, who respect others. And like our speakers have said, they have a purpose in life, make a better world. And we all make a better world in different ways, so many ways. And I'm as proud of that quality in America as any one quality we have. And it does reflect on Max Cleland. It reflects on Jan Scruggs. It reflects on every Vietnam veteran here today who is still giving, still contributing, doing something, and their families, and all the people that they have touched over the years. And as we grow older, we have an ability to reflect. What did happen 40 years ago, 60 years ago? What was it about? What did I do? And Americans have a way to put all that in perspective. I do. You think about some of the mistakes you made, how you could be better, how you could counsel, advise, help the younger generation. That's our responsibility. Vietnam veterans do it as well as anybody. My dad was in World War II, overseas for 2.5 years, and he died when I was in high school at age 39. But even in the short years that he was with us, and my brothers and I all knew him, he shaped us. And that World War II generation did shape us. And that's our responsibilities, to help shape our country for the better and make a better world for all people. It's always a privilege to be here, always a privilege to be around all of you who have contributed so much to our country and our future. And I encourage you to keep doing that. Just keep doing it. No matter how you're doing it, keep doing it. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Hagel. If I could ask those who are leaving wreaths today to please come forward. While our wreath bearers get in position, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge more of the folks in the audience. I'd like to give a personal thanks to all our Yellow Hat volunteers who do so much to honor and remember the veterans of today. And the staff of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund and their hard work all year long. Finally, I'd like to thank the small army of VPMF volunteers around the country who have been working for years to find photos of those listed on the wall for all our online wall of faces. These volunteers span the country from Florida to Hawaii and many places in between. Of the 58,281 inscribed on the wall, and through the dedication and diligence of these volunteers, we now have only 11 service members on the wall who do not have a photo. We're so close. I encourage all of you to take a look at our website and see if you can help us find those last few photos. Now, allow me to direct your attention to the representatives of several of our nation's leading veterans service organizations as they join in the laying of wreaths in honor of the fallen. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome bagpiper Chris Jackson, who will be playing Amazing Grace. The National Park Service Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, Vietnam Women's Memorial. Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Vietnam Women's Memorial. Gold Star Wives of America. American Gold Star Mothers. Military Order of the Purple Heart. Disabled American Veterans. (8 o'clock to 9 o'clock) PTSD class, Washington, D.C. Jewish War Veterans of the United States. Vietnam Veterans Memorial Volunteers. Vietnam Veterans of America. AM Vets, American Veterans. Associates of Vietnam Veterans of America. Scottish American Military Society. Non-commissioned officer candidates, 6769, Fort Benning. The American Legion. Sons and Daughters in Touch. U.S. Army OCS Alumni Association. Paralyzed Veterans of America. Veterans of Foreign Wars. Veterans Advisory Board of Verizon Corporation. '28th Infantry Regiment Association, the Black Lions. U.S. Army AmeriCal Division. First Marine Aircraft Wing Association, Vietnam Service. U.S. Army Ranger Association. In closing, let me encourage each of you to reach out and thank our veterans and their families, not just on Memorial Day, but every day of the year. I want to thank you all for coming. Our ceremony concludes with the playing of taps by Sergeant First Class Kevin Maloney. Please stand. Thank you all for coming, and please join us online.